4:53 p.m. You've probably noticed a pattern by now. You start the week with intention. You know what needs to be done. You even feel motivated. But by Wednesday, nothing's happened. By Friday, you're making the same promise you made last Monday. And by Sunday night, you're wondering why everyone else seems to execute while you're stuck in permanent preparation mode. Here's what nobody's telling you. The reason you don't finish isn't because you're lazy. It's not because you lack discipline. It's because your brain has developed what psychologists call a completion avoidance system. And until you understand why your nervous system is actively preventing you from finishing, you'll keep living in the gap between knowing and doing. If you're someone who has 47 browser tabs open right now, if you have 3 half-finished projects sitting in your folders, if you're better at starting than finishing, if you can plan perfectly but execute poorly, then what I'm about to show you is going to feel uncomfortably accurate. Most people think execution failure is about time management or focus. It's not. Execution psychology research shows that chronic non-finishers aren't struggling with capability. They're struggling with something far deeper: completion anxiety. Here's how it works. For most people, starting feels exciting. There's possibility, there's potential, there's the dopamine hit of a new beginning. But finishing is terrifying, because the moment you complete something, it becomes real. It gets judged. It proves whether you're actually good enough or not. So your brain does something brilliant. It keeps you in the middle, forever planning, forever optimizing, forever preparing. Because as long as you haven't finished, you haven't failed. And as long as you haven't failed, your ego stays protected. Behavioral scientists call this the safety of incompletion, and it's quietly destroying your potential. Let me show you what this looks like. You're working on a project. Could be a business idea, a creative piece, a career move. You're 80% done, and suddenly everything slows down. You find new things that need research. You discover flaws that need fixing. You convince yourself it's not ready yet, not because it's actually incomplete, but because finishing means exposure, and exposure means risk. Your brain starts whispering, what if it's not good enough? What if people don't care? What if you put it out there and nothing happens? So instead of finishing, you refine, you tweak, you wait for perfect clarity. And perfect clarity never comes, because your brain doesn't want it to come. This is the psychology of the perpetual optimizer. You're not perfecting your work, you're protecting your ego. Studies from decision science show that people who struggle to complete tasks aren't afraid of failure. They're afraid of definitive feedback. As long as the project is unfinished, it exists in a space of pure potential. It could be great, it could change everything. But the moment you finish and release it, reality collapses that potential into something concrete. And concrete things can be rejected. So your nervous system creates resistance. Not obvious resistance, subtle resistance. You'll feel tired right when you sit down to finish. You'll suddenly remember 12 other things that need your attention. You'll get a strong urge to research one more thing, optimize one more detail, wait one more week. And because this feels logical, you listen. But it's not logic, it's fear wearing a productivity mask. Here's how you know if completion anxiety is running your life. 1. You're more comfortable talking about what you're going to do than showing what you've done. 2. You have more unfinished projects than completed ones. 3. You feel productive but have nothing to show for it. 4. The closer you get to finishing, the more resistance you feel. If any of that landed, you're not dealing with a discipline problem. You're dealing with an identity protection mechanism. Now here's where it gets deeper. Chronic non-finishers often have a specific psychological profile. They were the smart kid, the one with potential, the one everyone said would do great things, and that label became their identity. I'm the person with potential. But here's the trap. Potential only exists in the future. The moment you finish and put something into the world, you're no longer the person with potential. You're the person with results. And results can be average. Results can be ignored. Results can prove that maybe you weren't as special as everyone thought. So you stay in potential forever, because potential can't be disproven. Execution psychology calls this the gifted child trap, and it explains why some of the smartest people you know execute the least. They're not protecting their time, they're protecting their self-concept. So how do you actually fix this? Here's what doesn't work. Trying harder, more discipline, better time management. Because you're not failing due to lack of effort. You're failing because your brain has built a psychological defense system against completion, and you can't discipline your way out of a nervous system response. What works is a process called exposure-based execution, and it operates in 3 phases. Phase 1, shrink the completion threshold. Right now, your brain sees completion as this massive, high-stakes event. Finish the business plan, launch the product, publish the book. And because the stakes feel so high, your nervous system activates threat mode, so you don't aim for complete, you aim for complete enough. You set a definition of done that's 80% of perfect. Not because you're lowering standards, but because you're removing the psychological barrier that's keeping you stuck. Research from behavioral activation therapy shows that imperfect completion beats perfect incompletion every single time. Because completed work teaches you. Unfinished work just sits there, consuming mental energy while giving you nothing back. You finish the draft, even if it's rough. You send the outreach, even if the message isn't perfect. You publish the content, even if you could make it better. And in doing so, you train your brain that completion doesn't equal death. Phase 2, separate process from outcome. Here's what's happening in your nervous system. You fuse the act of finishing with the fear of judgment. So every time you move toward completion, your brain interprets it as moving toward rejection. You have to break that connection. And you do it by redefining what finishing means. Finishing doesn't mean success. Finishing means data. You're not completing the project to prove you're good. You're completing the project to learn what happens next. This is a psychological reframe that completely changes your relationship with execution. When completion equals learning instead of evaluation, your nervous system stops treating it as a threat. You're not risking your ego anymore. You're just running an experiment. Studies in growth mindset research confirm this. People who view finished work as feedback loops instead of final judgments execute 3 times more consistently because they've removed the emotional weight from completion. Phase 3, build a completion identity through micro finishes. Your brain doesn't believe what you tell it, it believes what you show it. Right now, you've shown your brain hundreds of times that you're someone who starts but doesn't finish. So that's the identity it's protecting. You change that identity through evidence. Not big evidence, micro evidence. You finish small things, deliberately. A 300-word piece of writing, 1 outreach message, 1 task from start to done with no interruption. And you do it again and again until your brain starts updating its story about who you are. You're not becoming disciplined. You're becoming someone for whom finishing is normal. And the only way to become that person is to finish things, even tiny things. Because each completion is proof, and proof rewrites identity. Now here's the layer most people miss. Non-execution isn't just psychological, it's physiological. When you've been stuck in the preparation phase for months or years, your nervous system adapts. It becomes comfortable in the pre-completion state. And comfort creates homeostasis. Your body literally resists change because staying unfinished has become your baseline. This is why you can know exactly what to do and still not do it. It's not a knowledge problem, it's a nervous system regulation problem. So you don't push through resistance, you regulate through it. When you feel the urge to stop right before finishing, you pause. You notice the sensation, you name it. That's completion anxiety. Not truth, just a pattern. And then you act anyway, not because it feels good, but because you're training a new normal. Neuroscience research shows that repeated exposure to the thing you avoid literally rewires your threat detection system. The more you finish despite the discomfort, the less your brain interprets completion as dangerous. You're not building discipline, you're desensitizing fear. Here's what happens when you actually shift from chronic starter to consistent finisher. You stop living in your head. You stop waiting for the right mood, the right moment, the right level of ready. You start accumulating proof, real proof, not potential, not ideas, actual completed work that exists in the world. And that proof doesn't just build your resume, it builds your belief in yourself. Because deep down, every unfinished project whispers the same message. You're not the kind of person who follows through. But every finished project whispers something different. You are. So here's the truth about people who hardly execute. They're not broken. They're not incapable. They're just stuck in a psychological loop where starting feels safer than finishing, where potential feels better than proof, where the fantasy of what could be feels more comfortable than the reality of what is. But that loop isn't permanent. It's just a pattern. And patterns can be interrupted. So here's your one move. Don't aim to finish everything. Aim to finish one thing. Today. This week. Something small. Or something that's 80% done. And instead of making it perfect, make it done. Not because it's ready, but because you're becoming someone who finishes. Because the world doesn't reward potential. It rewards completion. And the moment you become someone who closes loops instead of collecting them, everything shifts. If this explains something you've felt but couldn't name, subscribe. Next week, we're dissecting why your brain convinces you to quit right before the breakthrough, and why that's not coincidence, it's design.